So tonight we've got as a presenter Keith Swope. He's a hunter education instructor. What I love about Keith is a hunting mentor. He's not all about going out and killing birds all the time by himself, but he's going to be sharing some stories about how he mentors other hunters. He's a lifelong National Wild Turkey Federation member. And Keith, why don't you talk to us a little bit about this memorable hunt?
So yeah, this was a few years ago. This was a good friend of mine named Mark, and he came over with another really good friend of mine from Reno, and Gary, and we took him out for his first turkey hunt, and he'd never been actively involved with turkeys or hunted turkeys before. And it was quite the memorable experience when the bird flew down in the dark. It was still plenty dark outside. Flew down within 5 feet of him and strutted around the decoy and knocked over the decoy. And Mark couldn't even take a shot because it wasn't even shooting light yet. Wow. So, not to mention, it was so dark that he continuously had to adjust his brightness on his red dot scope in order to make it functional so that he can actually see the bird and through the red dot scope at the same time. This was a really memorable experience just because it was Mark's very first turkey. I got to be there, call the bird in for him, and just recently Mark passed away from cancer. It was a pretty tough pill to swallow for me, but it's a memorable experience because I got to be there with him for his very first turkey, and it was just an enjoyable experience for me. So
Awesome.
There's a lot of other memorable experiences like that in my career of hunting turkeys, and this spring, planning on taking a young man out from Bakersfield that's going to be in a track chair that we work diligently hard to get him the money for that track chair. So it's going to be a fun youth hunt this year.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah.
And our other presenter is Justin Haley, and he's here with his wife, who we just kind of last minute convinced her to do this. And so Hannah, thank you so much for being here. It looks like we've got a little one.
Special guest star.
That's awesome. So Justin is a hunter education instructor as well. He also loves to take other people out hunting. And I kid around with Justin sometimes. He's a law enforcement officer that actually should be a game warden. I've patrolled with him, and he would make a super good game warden. I think your dad is a game warden, correct, Justin?
Yeah, I grew up in a house with a dad as a game warden, and I realized early on I like hunting. So that probably wasn't the career path for me because that was the busy time of year.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, there's always good to have a plan to fall back on.
Yeah, awesome.
Yep.
So you guys had a memorable season. Talk to us about your last hunting season, last turkey hunting season, and I think this was your first time actually ever hunting. Is that correct, Hannah?
Yeah, that's correct. This was my first time hunting ever.
Well, let me open this story up. And then I'll let her
I love it.
So Hannah was recovering from a surgery, and one day I come home from work and she said, hey honey, I just finished getting my hunter safety. Let's go get my hunting license. So we go into town, we're getting her license, and she says, let's go to the gun store. And she had to twist my arm to make me go to the gun store. And they had a 20 gauge Winchester pump action in camouflage on the wall. And she says, honey, I want this gun. So we came home with that gun, and 2 weeks later is where I'll let Hannah pick the story up.
Awesome. What happened, Hannah?
So we went out on some national forest land and tried to call some birds and just kind of got a feel for it. I heard some birds out in the distance, and they didn't come in. But we were hearing them gobble and stuff out in the distance. We tried that a couple days unsuccessfully, and then got some access to some private property from my family. And found a bird that was roosted. We found some roosted birds and went there and scouted them and went out to hunt them and called them in, and we were a little bit too far away. They wouldn't come down to us, so we didn't make it to them.
Yeah.
We went out a few times, and yeah, it didn't work out a couple times. I went out by myself and missed a shot. That was pretty heartbreaking for me, but I was really proud to go out by myself.
She even filmed herself, which was very impressive.
I got a pretty good video of a really good strut and all the hens coming down from the roost and everything. It was really great. Really good experience for me, for sure.
I love it.
And then we went out with Keith.
Okay.
And Keith took us to some land, and the bird, man, he sounded real far away, and we didn't think he'd come up. And then, I mean, he ran up to us, and Justin he was sitting right next to me, and he was telling me to take the shot, and I couldn't see the bird yet. I couldn't see him yet, and I could hear him drumming, and I couldn't see him yet. And finally he peeked up above some brush, and I saw his head and got a good shot, got him right in the neck.
Nice.
After she identified the proper, bearded turkey and yeah.
Well, I watched him, I saw him walk up, and then he hid.
Yeah.
And then he hid behind the brush is what happened. So
awesome. So did he go down right away, Hannah?
Yeah, he flopped a bit, and it was just, man, I was shaking. I don't think I'd ever shook so hard in my life. I was so excited. I just felt really proud. It was just a really cool experience to have with my husband and my good friend. And yeah, it was just a really beautiful experience. Then we went out another day and got another bird that came across the creek and ran up to us, and I was able to get that bird too. And it was just a really incredible experience. I got to sit next to the guys and hear them call and learn how to call a little better, and bring these birds home to my kids.
I love it.
And
it sounds to me like you've got full-blown gobbler fever. I love it.
Yeah, I'm looking for them all over the place. I'm already scouting for this season. I already want to go back and get the bird that I lost. We named him Earl, and Earl's gonna die. And so I got to go out and get the bird that I missed my shot at. But yeah,
that's awesome.
It's been a really cool experience. My boys were really interested in seeing me bring a bird home, and that kind of pride and being able to make that food and share it with my family was a really cool experience. And I can definitely see why my husband has been so into it his whole life.
Okay. Yeah, sounds like your husband's had the bug for a while. Yeah. So you might have, let's do this. You might have the gobbler fever if what happens to you. Keith, I know you have it bad. What's a common symptom for this gobbler fever?
Your blood pressure rises. You feel like your head's gonna explode. You can't breathe. It's uncontrollable shakes. And I still get it to this day. You can't, if you're losing that experience, you need to quit hunting. That's what it's all about for me. Just last night I watched, and many people here might know the Pinhoti Project, and watched a show that Dave put out last night, and you could hear his heart thumping through the camera, and his heavy breathing, and he's like, I haven't been shook up on one like that in a long time, and I'm like, that's the experience that you feel, and
that's what it's all about.
That's what I get every time I'm out after birds. That's for sure.
Right on.
And how about you, Justin? What are some of your symptoms, bud?
Every time I hear a car door shut, I think it's a bird drumming right behind me. Sleep deprivation and a severe increase in caffeine from making coffee at 4 a.m.
I like it.
Hearing gobblers when you're just drifting off to sleep and you know they're roosted and it can't possibly be a gobble, but you swear you just heard one.
Yeah.
Wondering if I've got enough shells in my vest and if my calls are all conditioned up and ready to go.
Yeah.
And wondering who's going to watch the kids and whose turn it is to go hunting now.
Yeah.
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 Babysitter.
So I've had all those similar symptoms. I think one that sticks with me is like even after the hunt, it's like even as you're laying your head down on the pillow at night and you're closing your eyes and you're actually seeing birds and you're hearing gobbles. I think that happens to me regularly on different hunts, and it's just I don't know. It's hard to explain to other people that haven't heard that and seen that, but it's just a wonderful experience. And Hannah, you did an awesome job describing that, especially as a new hunter. So
Yeah, the
let's talk a little
anticipation's
bit.
pretty intense.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about preseason preparation and what's in your hunting vest and what kind of attire you're wearing.
My vests are always ready. My decoys are always ready. My guns are always cleaned and ready to operate and ready to go. The one thing that I got to caution a lot of people about is that there are so many gimmicky things out there in the world for turkey hunting, and you don't need a whole lot. The biggest thing that you're going to need really is a couple decent calls, some good camouflage, maybe some kind of seat cushion or something of that sort, a good pair of boots, a nice light jacket to put on because it gets pretty cold in the morning. And that's pretty much all you really need to go hunting. But there are some really good things out there to keep you comfortable. And turkey vest is definitely one of those things. And there's a myriad of different styles to them. I've got, I don't know, I've probably got 10 different vests in the garage right now that are loaded with turkey calls and everything that I need to go. And one of the main reasons why I do that is because I have different camo and I like to try to match my camo, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's the most important thing in the world.
Yeah.
But some days there's certain calls and one vest that I like that I want to try, and then there's other calls in another vest that I want to try. So I'll mix match it up and try different things every time I go out. Then I wind up using one for majority of the season, and it's crazy. It's an addiction, really. The calls, the vests, the camo, everything. It turns into an addiction, and I'm guilty of it. I have a lot of stuff that I probably don't even need. But just getting into the basics of what I carry in my vest, one of the very most important things that I really like to have is a good pair of cutting shears, primarily because you can get yourself into some good brushy situations, and you need to be able to cut those shooting lanes out to where you're able to get a good clear shot at your gun, your turkey. Another thing I like to have is definitely some deep woods off. I don't know if you can see all that. Mosquitoes, ticks, I hate them things with a passion. So I make sure I always have a good can of this or a Thermacell, whatever works best for you. I like the off because I spray it on my boots, and I usually use snake boots to try to keep those them ticks from crawling up. Roll of toilet paper, always a must. You got to have a roll of toilet paper with you. That coffee will get to you after a while. Definitely a myriad of different types of turkey calls, depending on what you like to run. I've got hundreds of mouth calls in each one of my vests. I have at least one box call in each vest. I'll usually have a slate and a glass or a slate and an aluminum pot call. You can have a myriad of those. I always carry extra face masks, extra gloves. I always carry multitudes of that because a lot of times I go out hunting with somebody and they don't have it, so I make sure I have enough for somebody else. Other things that I like to have too is a good pair of small binoculars. You'll see a lot of folks like on YouTube and stuff, they're carrying a lot of big binoculars with them. I particularly don't really care for the big binoculars on me because they just kind of get in my way. I don't use binoculars that much, but every once in a while, if I need them, I can break out a small pair and go after them, you know, and use them. Some of the gimmicky things, you know, some people like to weigh their turkey. I do have a scale in this vest, actually. You can weigh your turkey with a scale. Another thing that I like to have with me is a turkey tote. There's myriads of different kinds out there because if you're out there miles away from where you parked, a turkey tote is going to be come in real handy. Or you know, you got a good vest, you can throw it in the back of your vest. Another thing I like to have, Hunter Specialties makes these. It's a gun rest, a knee gun rest. And I always put it on my knee. It's much more enjoyable when I can have that gun sitting on that cushion there. And I don't have to worry about my hand underneath it and my hand going numb or any of that kind of thing. Another thing, you got to be carrying decoys. You got to have a bag of decoy stakes. That's another thing I have with me all the time. We were talking earlier a little bit about how to make, you know, do good camera shots. So maybe a little selfie stick or something of that sort that you can put in your vest and be able to take, you know, better pictures. And another thing I like to have too is I like to carry like blind cloth because primarily this is for when I'm trying to film my turkey hunts. I have my tripod and I can wrap this around my tripod and cover that up a little bit so the turkeys aren't seeing it. And another overlooked call that a lot of people don't have is actually the wing of the turkey. I cut the top end of the turkey wing off of that, and I can make a good fly down sound with it, or I can drag it in the leaves, sound like a tom, you know, any of that kind of stuff. So that's primarily what I carry in my vest most of the time. You know, you got to have the shells that are going to match your gun, of course. And, you know, we'll get into more of what we're going to do preseason, but scouting is number one. You got to get out there. You got to try to find the birds. You got to roost the birds, and we'll get into that a little bit more later on. But all that stuff is the important things to think about.
Awesome. So Justin and Hannah, is there anything that you have in your vest that Keith didn't talk about?
I guarantee he's got it. He just didn't talk about it. I've got about 4 or 5 things. Number one is your hunting license.
Oh yeah.
I don't have that in my vest.
I carry 5 rounds and I carry the box they came in. So when, you know, the game warden comes up, you can show them it's non-lead. I think Keith said I carry extra calls that are waterproof. Like this is an aluminum pot call with a striker. A locator call, this is a crow call, so you can shock gobble. So in case you don't want that bird coming right now, you can still find out where he's at. When you're in the woods, always carry a lighter. And then pretty important, I carry a little piece of Brillo cloth, a little square of sandpaper, and some chalk. That's to condition my slate and my box call.
I forgot to go over that too.
Yep.
I got it right there.
Because you can condition your calls in the morning, but after you run them for a little bit, they're going to need a little work to sound their best.
Little flashlight or a headlamp is another important thing to think about.
Same with Keith. This is just off of a bird I shot 10 years ago, and it's in my vest. And then I carry binoculars and I carry a monocular. I got this pretty fancy little chest rig after watching the Pinhoti project. It's got my binos in there for if you shot gobble something and you can see through the trees good enough, you get a high spot, you can kind of scout them like you scout elk or something.
Love it.
Other than that, I have nothing further that Keith didn't already touch.
Yeah.
Hannah might have something that she would need that I didn't even think about.
No, I mean, I'm still very new. This is going to be my second season that I'm going into, so I'm still trying to
Yeah.
figure out what I like and don't like. However,
Right.
I do get very cold, and I like to have some hand warmers. That helps me. I get very, very cold.
Yeah.
So little hand warmers in the morning before that sun really gets shining on you is helpful. That's what I've found so far, but I've got a lot of learning to do still.
Awesome.
Oh,
So Keith, you already mentioned a little bit about scouting. You guys want to get into that, or have you guys already been out poking around scouting for birds?
Absolutely.
yep. We have.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So I've been out a few times and checking some of my old haunts there, my old stomping grounds out in the forest, seeing what things are looking like out there. Unfortunately, a lot of my spots are not showing a lot of sign right now at this point, but things is turkeys are kind of migratory. When things get a little colder, they probably want to migrate down a little bit in elevation, and then they'll start to come into those areas a little later on in the spring. But it doesn't take a lot to scout. You just got to get out there and walk. For the most part, you're looking for tracks. You're looking for scat. And when I'm talking about scat, the poop, there's two ways to differentiate between a gobbler and a hen. The poop will look more like a popcorn kernel, and the gobbler's poop will look like a J hook. So, when you're looking for those signs there, you pay attention to that, and it'll kind of give you an indication of whether there's a gobbler out there. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's a Jake or a Tom. It just means that it's a male bird.
Yeah.
The other thing is, when you're looking at tracks, you can usually tell a female from a male by looking at the track. Males weigh a lot more, so they're a little more flat-footed than the hens. The hens you'll just see the three toes with on a hen, where the tom you'll see more of the full foot, and on the back end of that foot there's a little circular pad, and if that shows that indentation in the sand or the mud, you're more than likely dealing with a tom. You'll definitely see the difference in the variations of the size for the tracks. So when you're out there scouting, that's the kind of stuff you're looking for. You can be out there all hours of the day. You're listening for birds too while you're out there. Birds are noisy. They'll gobble, they'll cackle, they'll yelp, they'll do all kinds of noise all year long. So don't be afraid to listen for that. And then if you do find them, your best option is to make sure that you kind of keep an eye on them for a good majority of the day if you can, and try to pattern what they're doing. If you can pattern them, you're going to give yourself a lot more of an edge.
Right.
Where they're going, what they're doing on this day, part of the day, where they're going to roost, where they're flying down from the roost, so on and so forth. The more you can pattern them, the more you're going to have a better chance.
Very good.
But scouting,
So let me.
that's the biggest thing you got to do, is you got to get out there and do it. It's important.
Yeah. So you mentioned something, Keith, about the birds being migratory, and it's a good segue to a question that came in on the Q&A.
Mhm.
And the question is, how do weather patterns impact the spring breeding cycle of turkeys? And he asks, if we get a late winter and it doesn't begin to warm up until late April, will this impact gobbling activity and calling tactics?
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Yeah, like last year we had a late spring last year. We had a very long, lengthy winter. We were at this point I was dealing with about 3 feet of snow here, and I know Justin and Hannah probably had 5 at their place at this point right now. And it delayed our turkey season incredibly because of how late the winter went and how extensive it was. Multiple atmospheric rivers, multiple snow events. But even with that, birds are still out there. They're still active. They're still doing things, and they still have to feed. They still have to live. And in order for them to do that, they have to come off of the roost. And, they're probably going to do that a little bit later in the day if they're getting wet all night long. They're trying to stay up there and dry, but they will definitely they will migrate out of the snow if they have to. And they're not going to go, they don't have to go far. They're just trying to get down lower in elevation to where there's not quite as much snow. However, there's other subspecies of turkeys that deal with the snow very easily. And, our Rios, they don't like it so much, but they'll deal with it if they have to. So, they don't migrate very far, but they will if they have to.
Right.
They got to
Let's
get
go
to
on.
food.
Let's get into method of take, and let's talk a little bit about archery strategies. So for archery, would you recommend using a blind? Well, what are your thoughts on that? And if so, why?
Yes, I would definitely recommend a blind for archery season. Primarily because it's not saying that you can't do it without a blind. A lot of people do, but you're putting a lot of attachments onto your bow a lot of times to try to cover up the look of the bow and yourself for the most part. But it is a lot easier with a blind. And if you're going to use a blind, you look at this picture that we're dealing with right here, they're brushing it in. That's important. You're giving yourself the benefit of the doubt because, when you brush that thing in like that, it doesn't look like a something that they've never seen out in the middle of their bedroom. However, blinds usually don't affect turkeys too much. So you can stick it out there in the middle of a field a couple days before or a day that day, and a lot of times you'll be just fine. But when you're in that blind, you if you look at the picture there, you can see it's completely blacked out and through the windows. And that's what you're looking for. You don't want to have any windows on the back side open to allow light in to where they catch your movement inside there. Dark clothing, camouflage clothing, that all works really well in the blind. You just do not want to have that back window open to where that sunlight's coming through and it allows those birds to see you in there.
I got some lines there, Eric. If you got little guys that you're trying to introduce to hunting, blinds are a godsend. Yep. Just make sure you bring a coloring book and some crayons or something that doesn't give off light or make noise, and lots of treats.
Yep.
So
can we back up just one?
Blinds
can we back up just one there?
Sure. Yeah.
Just a little bit more on archery. If you look at the turkeys over here on this side, you can see the different shot placements on turkeys with bow, and that's what you kind of want to concentrate. With a bow, you're definitely aiming small and missing small a lot more than you are with a shotgun. Another thing you got to really concentrate on too, when you're dealing is yardage, and you don't want to be too far out when you're actually flinging that arrow. And the other thing is your broadhead. The only broadhead I use is one I use for elk hunt. It's got 3 blades on it, fixed broadhead. Mechanicals, I've seen them fail too many times, especially with turkeys. Not saying it can't be done, but I don't agree with them too much. So think about what you're going to use for deer or elk or whatever the case may be, any big game. You're probably going to want to use the same setup for turkey.
I like it. So let's get into shotgun strategies. And Hannah, what did you use on your turkey hunts last year?
I used a 20 gauge.
Okay.
Winchester 20 gauge, and that felt very comfortable for me. I've shot 12 gauges before, but it was just a little heavy for me. So yeah. 20 gauge was very comfortable for my frame.
Yeah. And so, Justin, have you ever used like a 410 or something smaller?
No, I haven't. I typically stick with a 12 gauge.
Yeah.
I do have a turkey shotgun that's dedicated just for turkeys, and then I have a goose and duck shotgun. Um, my wife's laughing at that one. There's reasons, man. I mean, but Keith is the 410 expert of the group, and he only needs 2 or 3 pellets to kill a tom. So I'll let him talk about those smaller gauges. But I typically stick with my trusty old 12 gauge.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's talk
yeah.
410, Keith.
Okay. Well, back in the day when I first started hurting, 10 gauge was all the talk. You know, you needed the biggest, baddest gun that you could possibly think of in order to kill a turkey. I never got one of those 10s, but I have plenty of 12s that are designated to turkey, and my Remington 870 Super Mag was the one that I love the most. Out of all my guns, I love that gun the most, even to this day. I still got 2 other 12s that are set up for turkey. I got 3 other 20s that are set up for turkey, but just 2 years ago, I wound up getting the Stevens 301 410. And I tell you what, that thing is pretty dang impressive. It's I'm using the factory choke on it. I put a small, you know, a small little red dot scope on it because it's got the Picatinny reel on the top for a scope. And I'm just using Federal TSS number 9s, and I've already killed 10 birds with it so far in the last 2 years. So it'll reach out and poke, and it does an amazing job. It's not only lightweight and easy to carry, but it definitely will reach out there and touch the birds if you need it to. And on top of that, it provides a challenge for you because you've got a single shot. That's it, one shot, and if you miss that shot, you're out of luck. You know, unless that bird decides to just stick around because he doesn't know what's going on. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
Hey
Awesome.
Eric, there's a comment in the chat I'd like to address real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
Someone mentioned using air guns. Just make sure whatever your method that you want to hunt, that you abide by all, you know, wildlife regulations. I don't know. I'm not familiar with air guns and their legality in harvesting upland game birds. But I'd hate to see someone that attended one of our webinars, you know, go out there and inadvertently break a game law. So, you know, air guns are maybe a valuable option. Just make sure you check the regs before you go out there and use an air gun. I know some states allow center fire rifles, but I know California doesn't allow pretty much anything but archery and shotgun. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you can use air guns. We'll get into that a little bit later. Let's talk about patterning a shotgun. Just give us a couple quick tips on doing this. Does this need to be like a
This could be a class all in itself.
multi-$100 investment?
This could be a class all in itself, Eric. In
Yeah.
all honesty, it could be a multi-$100 investment for sure. And the biggest thing you're trying to do is you're trying to get the best pattern that you possibly can. And what I mean by best pattern is 80% of your shot within a 30-inch circle. That is like your best pattern that you can possibly think of. But in today's time, we're dealing with different loads and different kinds of ammunition. We're dealing with many different kinds of chokes. And basically, in a nutshell, what I have to say is that it's whatever works best for your gun. Every gun's designed differently. Every gun will shoot differently. And so you can try 50 different chokes, and then one is going to stand out among all the others that you've tried. You're going to try different 50 rounds of ammunition, and one's going to stand out more than the others with that specific choke. So you're trying to match that specific choke and that specific ammunition to get the densest pattern that you can into the head and neck and the vitals of the turkey. So really, that's patterning in a shot, and it's in a nutshell. You have to try different rounds. You have to try different chokes and see what works best with your gun. You look at any of the turkey hunting pages on Facebook or Instagram or any of that stuff, and there's multitudes of different patterns and different chokes and different ammunition and information on there. Don't take one to heart. You got to go out there and you got to try and you got to constantly shoot to figure out exactly what's going to work best for your gun.
Very good. So there's a lot of talk about, I think it's in the hunting community in general, there's a lot of overarching communication about this or that, and sometimes little of that is actually explained. So I've heard about roosting turkeys from the, since I was 12 years old, and I don't think I've had very many people actually explain how to actually do that. Hannah, do you mind kind of tackling this subject? It sounds like you've had some success doing this.
Yeah, we did have some success with roosting the turkeys. So we were scouting the property. We learned about their patterns, where they were kind of eating in the afternoon. And then we ended up finding the tree that they were roosting in. And so we went out to this property multiple times to figure out where these birds were. And and we at the end of the day, I mean, it was dusk and we watched them fly up into the tree. And so it was a little bit to figure out what they were doing and where they were going. And then we went out to hunt them again, to hunt them the next day after we had seen them that night. They were in that tree. That's where they were. That's where they stayed. And they flew down where we thought they would the first go round, when I did it. And
she just couldn't pull off a safe shot.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And I'm, if you know me, I'm big on hunter's ethics. So yeah, but it ended up working out.
Yeah.
Very good. So just so everybody knows, we've done multiple turkey calling webinars. Last year we were on with Keith and Justin, and we talked a lot about calling. I just wanted to take a second and just quickly kind of review just the basic calls. And again, this is going to be recorded, so you're going to be able to go back to this webinar and kind of listen to this. And to me, the more you listen to turkey calling, the better. So go ahead and give us, let's start with the plain yelp. Go ahead, Keith, hit us a few notes on that.
Okay. Yeah. So plain yelp of a hen, basically is really all you need to call in a turkey. And, it's very simple. You can do it on multiple different kinds of calls, slate calls, box calls, mouth calls, whatever. But this is basically what it sounds like. I don't want to get too far into it. I hope everybody was able to hear that.
Got it. Sounded really good. So hit me with some clucking and purring.
Okay.
Very good. So let's just say you've got a gobbler and maybe he's responded maybe to a call or two. Is it tricky sometimes to know if that gobbler is actually coming into your call?
You want me to start this or?
I'll put my
Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I'll put my 2 cents in real quick. Typically, if he's talking to you, he's gonna come see you. It may not be right now, but it may be 3 or 4 hours from now. But if he's talking to you, he's gonna run out of the hens that he's with, and he's gonna come check it out. The name of this game is patience, and just having a little bit of patience. If you're getting a bird that's responding to your calls, that's, I mean, the game is yours to lose at that point.
Yeah.
Um, real
So I
quick,
saw somebody put in the chat that every time they start calling turkeys, the turkeys actually are moving away from them. I know that's not a good sign, but sometimes that's natural, right? Sometimes the birds aren't going to be responsive. Maybe they're henned up and they're actually moving away. Do you
so
guys have any strategies for a bird that's actually moving away from you?
it's been my experience, and I'll let Keith talk about this too. If that happens, typically it's not that you sounded like a wounded whale or anything. It's that the hen that Tom is with didn't like the way you sounded, and she's taking her boys and going home. That's typically what that is. That being said, as the day progresses and more hens get bred and walk off to nest for the day, there's going to be less opportunity for that Tom to breed, and he may still be interested. So again, patience is key.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree completely with what Justin's saying. The biggest thing that you got to kind of consider is how much room do you have to work with in the place that you're hunting. If you're hunting on a small chunk of private land and you can't get in front of those birds, that might be an issue for you. And then the hens are going to drag the boys away, and that's it. That's the end of it for a little while.
Right.
But like Justin said, a little later on in the day, those hens are going to nest, then things might get a little active on you real quick. So, but the tactic really is that you're going to make big wide loops and try to get ahead of those birds if they're going in a certain direction. It may be the hens dragging the toms away, or it could be meaning that they're going to a place for food, or they're going for a place for water, or that the toms have certain strut zones that they like to go to and strut, and that's where they're trying to get to. So it doesn't mean that they're actually just leaving you entirely. There's something that's driving them. But also, like Justin was saying, is that hens, the boss hen might not like what you're delivering, and she doesn't want to fight, and she just wants to take off with the toms. So, but if it's vice versa, it can happen as well. You can put those calls out, and that hen is going to drag the toms to you because she's mad that you're there in her area. She don't know who you are. So it can work both ways, but you got to kind of, the biggest thing is you gotta be out there in the woods and play with birds enough to try to read what they're actually doing. Feel them out. Try to get, you can try to call birds in off of private property into public land. I've done it many times. It works. It can happen. But sometimes you're there for many hours trying to do it. But you got to be patient. That's the other big thing to it, is being patient, and so on and so forth. I can talk to them blue in the face about that, but it's
I got one more thing to add is,
Yeah.
he's coming if you hear him spitting and drumming.
Oh man.
You can't hear that more than about 40 feet away. And if you hear that, boom, you better get ready and pop your safety off, because it's about to be showtime.
And take a deep breath.
And take it. Yeah.
Just don't hold it.
That's why I locked the bird, is because I didn't take that deep breath. I was holding my breath.
Oh,
Hey, before we move on, there's some good stuff in the chat. Does anybody know a company that makes a latex-free diaphragm call? And I do not. I stick with one brand that I like, and they are latex brand.
There are some. I think one of them might be Hook's Custom Calls, if I can remember right, but I'm not positive on that. But there are some calls out there, or manufacturers that are actually building them without latex.
Cool. And then another person asked what shot size is best for turkey. That's personal preference. I'm not going to name any brands, but it's made out of a metal called Heavy Shot, and it's a blend of 5, 6, and 7. I know Keith sometimes uses this same load, sometimes uses different loads. You got to pattern your gun to find out what your gun likes.
So my 12s and 20s, I'm using the same shot that Justin's using, the heavy shot mag blend 5.67. It's got 3 different shot sizes in it. But for my 410, I like the number 9 TSS. And we can get into a huge discussion and topic about, TSS versus, this and that and the other. But the biggest thing you guys got to remember here in California is that you have to use non-toxic shot. I don't believe metal is a good shot at all whatsoever, or steel for that matter. I don't like it for turkey at all, but it can be done. Stuff like the mag shock or the TSS or something like that, I believe is going to benefit you a lot more, but the price difference on it is extensive. So just think about that when you're looking for shot.
And then
And we'll hit some more of the Q&A and stuff at the end.
Okay.
So this is the last thing you want when you're turkey hunting. You don't want that bird detecting you're there and perking up. And so what do you do when you're busted? Is it a game over? Do you pack up your lunch and go home? What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Justin.
I'll let my wife start this one off.
So the bird that I roosted, that we had roosted, I had missed a shot on him, and we went out a couple days later to try to get him, set up kind of the same way, and he would not come down to us. We were busted. We called that bird for an hour, I think.
Longer than that.
Longer than that. We were out there a long time calling that bird. And they wouldn't come out of the tree. And they flew a complete opposite direction than they had been flying out of the tree. So we were busted by that group, and we took a little break. We waited it out a little bit different. We went to a different area on the same property and set up a little bit differently, and ended up calling a different bird from a whole opposite direction, a whole different group. And he came from across the creek. So
Wow.
We were busted by one group and waited it out, and we were able to call in another bird from a different
It kind of goes back to what Justin was talking about, just patience and knowing. And to me, turkey hunting is so much about that, and just hanging in there, because you just never know what's going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah. One thing you got to kind of consider is that, when you hear an alarm putt, that's pretty much means almost game over, almost. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not moving and you're sitting still, the bird may see you, or they might have caught some movement or something that just didn't seem right or sit well with them. And the first reaction for them was going to be, they're going to give you some wing flips. Not necessarily stretching it all the way out, but just flipping it to their back. It's kind of a telltale sign of nervousness. And additionally, you'll hear that alarm putt probably. You'll hear it doesn't mean necessarily that the hunt's completely blown. You need to just kind of relax, refocus, just kind of settle down, and try to let that bird settle down a little bit, because he'll walk around and, get all weird and stuff, or he may just take off flying, or he may take off running. If he's done that, then you're probably the game's up. But if he's just hanging out there and he's kind of nervous a little bit, just try not to move, relax, take a deep breath, just let him settle down, and maybe you can work him in after that. Even after a shot, you take a shot at one bird, doesn't mean that another bird's going to probably jump up and flip around a little bit, and get scared from the shot, but he doesn't know where the shot came from. If you're hunting with a partner who wants to get a bird too, sit down after your shot, relax, refocus, give that other hunter an opportunity. That other bird might come right in and start beating up on that one that's down, and give you another opportunity for another bird. So you just got to You got to relax a little bit. Don't be the guys that are on TV and jump up and all excited and forget to take your safety and put your safety on, and go running after the bird. Just relax. The bird's dead if he's flopping. I guarantee you that. But sometimes if you get a bad shot, then you might need to take that gun with you. But you just got to chill out a little. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
We weren't supposed to talk about that, Keith.
Let's talk. We're going to go through a kind of a series of what ifs. That's kind of the beauty of this webinar. We've talked about, a lot of people are asking in the Q&A about the regulations and different rules on turkey hunting. We've kind of covered a lot of that, and maybe we could get into some of that toward the end of the webinar. But let's talk about like more tactics in this webinar and just really super practical things. So tips to hunting in bad weather. Like, what's the worst type of turkey hunting weather that you guys have hunted in?
You want to start it off?
I'll come out of left field and say a really hot, dry day.
Yeah.
Hard to be quiet in the woods.
Oh man.
And with the right kind of footwear and clothing, rainy, snowy days, really, I mean, the birds are out there, but on a wet day, it's real easy to be quiet. And I'm kind of the outlier on that, say that those hot, dry days are the worst days, but leaves are crunchy when it's dry.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Well, this picture here is a buddy of mine, Gary, that this was last spring, and it was miserably cold. We've been dealing with multiple feet of snow in the area for probably about a month or so, and we managed to pull this bird out in the first week of season in the snow. Like you said, birds are gobbling. They're still doing their thing. When spring hits and the driving force of reproduction hits, these birds are going to do what they're going to do, and regardless of weather. So snow, rain, hurricanes, tornadoes, that don't matter. They're going to be out there doing their thing. A lot of people hate going out in this stuff. I don't particularly care for it, but if I've got a short window of the season, I'm going to hunt it. I don't care. I got a month and a half or so to hunt, and every day that I can be out there, regardless of weather, I'm going to do it. If I'd done things a little bit differently, I could have set up my blind and stayed a little more dry on this situation. But we sat underneath the tree with the wet snow dripping all over us, and we were freezing our butts off the whole day waiting for this turkey to come in. But it panned out, as you can see. It works. There's many different things that you can do to try to make things work better for you in the long run. Blinds really come in easy, come in handy. You can put a heater in that thing and you'd be perfectly warm and comfortable sitting in a nice cushiony seat, and you're good to go.
You're starting to sound like a duck hunter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I will add to that, the bad weather is, and I forgot to mention it, I carry an extra pair of socks in my vest. Waterproof boots and an extra pair of socks will make a bad day into a good day pretty quick.
I do the same thing. So it sounds like, just talking to you guys, you've hunted out of state for turkeys and you've hunted new areas. Give us some real quick tips on traveling and what you guys how do you prepare for a road trip when you're turkey hunting?
Well, this is topical because Hannah and I are going to be traveling to Oregon for our wedding anniversary to hunt turkeys. Lucky me. First thing to do is get familiar with the regs for the state you're going to and get your permits, tags, licenses, whatever they call it, where you're going. Get all that squared away. And then I'm old school, MapQuest the route and figure out where you're going, when you're going to stay. I like to reach out to the local, wildlife biologist or game warden for the area and talk to them, or the property owner if you're going private property, and see what they're seeing. And that's just kind of step one. Real quick story, my bachelor party, Keith and I were supposed to go to Wyoming for my bachelor party to hunt turkeys, and we made it to Reno, and the state of Wyoming shut down for COVID. So we basically just drove to Cabela's and back.
Wow.
But we had all our licenses. Oh, make sure you have them with you before you leave, because we did have to wait for a guy for about 2 hours for his wife to bring it.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what if you don't get this kind of gobbler action, and turkeys are, some days it just seems like they're just so incredibly silent. What are some tactics for the quieter days?
So usually quieter means there's something going on that's causing this. And usually a lot of times it can be wind and weather. It can also mean there's predators in the area. And it can also mean that birds just aren't feeling it. You know, they're not ready for the event. You know, if you, especially earlier season, you know, they may not be in the reproduction mode yet. So there's multiple reasons why this would be going on, but if you're dealing with wind, high winds, and you know, or rainy days and stuff like that, you need to look into the fields, the open fields. Turkeys want to be in those areas because their number one safety net is their eyeballs, and they want to be able to see predators coming. So what are they going to do when the woods are real noisy with raindrops or real windy? They're going to want to try to get into those open fields. So if you're tucked way back into the timber somewhere and you're not hearing birds, it's probably because they're in the open fields about a mile away, and you know you're not thinking about those kinds of things. So weather patterns, you know, if it's a nice day, they may be more into the timber than they are in the open fields. You know, you gotta kind of figure out what they're doing, and that's part of the scouting and patterning part process that we talked about.
Yeah.
Birds will gobble, especially the ones here in California. Rio Grandes are notorious for gobbling all day long. Where you get out to different subspecies of turkeys like Easterns and Osceolas, once they fly down and they get with their hens, they shut up and you're never going to hear them again for the rest of the day. So, you know, that's the one good thing about the California birds that we have here is that we got those Rios who really like to gobble. They like to hear themselves.
One thing I would chime in on this, if it's real quiet, but you did get gobbles earlier in the day, I'm going to say it a million times, be patient. Don't give up. I've had several times where I've stood up in frustration only to see 2 or 3 toms coming at me that were coming in quiet. I had a buddy fly out from North Carolina and he stayed for 2 weeks, and we finally got him on a bird. And that's exactly what happened. He stood up out of frustration and immediately sat back down, and I knew what was going on, and he shot a bird about 20 seconds later.
Wow.
If it's quiet, but you know there's birds around, just be patient. That's the turkey hunter's greatest virtue.
Yeah. I've had many birds sneak in on me quietly without saying a peep. So you gotta figure that that could be a possibility for you. So
Yeah, we're winding down on time, guys. Just give us a couple quick keys or takeaways for good photographs.
you want to go?
Yeah, I'll give real couple quick ones. I found the best ones are always candid. Somebody else took them, like that picture of my oldest son and I on the left there. The non-posed pictures usually come out a little bit better. If you are going to pose them, Keith has a tripod that works great. Making sure that the sun's not straight in your face or straight behind you, that's always good. Make sure you get the bird, you know, in all its glory in the picture. If you are going to have a firearm in the picture, like the one right there, make sure the chamber's open and the camera sees that the chamber's open and the gun's pointed in a safe direction. Otherwise, you're just giving ammunition to somebody to talk smack about your cool picture.
really good tip. And then the other thing that I would just say is just learning from my mistakes, just take a bunch of pictures. Hunting is a gift. I'm convinced that it's an awesome thing, and it may be something that we're not able to do due to health reasons, or you never know what's going to happen in life. So err on the side of taking more photos, I think, than taking fewer.
Yep.
So let's go real quick on after the shot, game care and taxidermy. Hey, Justin, talk to us about this picture off to the right.
All right, I'm gonna see if I say this right. That was my boutonniere at my wedding. What that is there are like 3 little primary feathers on the edge, like the first knuckle on a turkey's wing. And a lot of people just kind of ignore them. I save every one of them. I have those feathers on my shelf right over here, actually. My wife and she had turkey feathers in her bouquet for her wedding. I mean, it's like we said, it's a fever. It's an addiction. We even had a Tom gobbling while we were saying our vows, and my eyes were going like this, like staring down the valley and looking at my wife. And
Love it.
yeah, so that's my boutonniere for my wedding. And then Hannah actually right here has the cape she made from her first bird, and she did this herself just using borax and a piece of plywood and some nails. She can hold that up. Turkey taxidermy is really easy if you just want the fan or the cape. It's just patience. It takes about 2 weeks for the fan to dry out. There's a lot of really good videos on YouTube that'll show you how to do it. It's just removing all the meat. Here, we can even pull that out.
Yeah.
So you want to remove all the meat from this joint on the front and back and just cover it in borax and let it sit for about 2 weeks. And I use little roofing nails and I pin it open. And then after 2 weeks, it basically turns into mummified, organic matter, and it stays open. You don't need to pay somebody $100 to do that. It's $5 in borax in about 15 minutes of time.
Yeah, and I watched a couple YouTube videos to do the cape. I was able to do that as a very inexperienced. I had never cut open a bird before. I had never done any of that before. So it was very easy for me to do, even learning for my very first time.
Same with the beard. This is kind of in the plaque, but you just cut the beard and let it sit in borax until that flesh dries all the way out, and then you've got your preserved beard.
Other things I like to do, I have a lot of Native American friends who like to use the feathers, and I will literally use and strip just about every feather off of the bird and give it to them for their dance regalia and stuff. And then on top of that, this fall, I specifically went out to harvest hens this fall. I left the gobblers alone this fall. I wanted to get a couple hens because I wanted the wing bones off of those hens for turkey calls. You use the first 3 wing bones on those call to make a call, and then sometimes toms will answer to that only. You can throw all these other things out there, and then you blow one on one of those wing bones, and next thing you know, he's answering to it. So I like to have one in each one of my vests.
Love it.
Plenty of things to use on a turkey.
One thing I really appreciate about both of you guys is that you love not only harvesting birds, but you put all of it to use. Talk to us about some recipes maybe, or where you find recipes. We're not going to go into specific recipes, but what part of the turkey, the actual meat, are you using? Why don't you start us out, Justin?
I will say don't throw the legs away.
Yeah.
That's a lot of meat on those legs. There's a lot of tendons. I'll let my wife, who's the expert on how to cook those, talk about it. I eat the liver, the kidneys, and the heart as well. I usually eat those the day of, just fry them up real quick. And if anybody says wild turkey meat doesn't taste good, they just don't know what they're doing. So I'll let Hannah talk about how to cook, because I dry it out a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my favorite part is eating the birds, preparing those meals for my family. I think for me, that full circle was really enjoyable for me as a first-time hunter. I'd cooked wild turkey before that Justin had brought home, but it was definitely a different feel when I did it myself. Yeah, we like
Awesome.
to cook up the legs, and I crock pot them. We make turkey tacos out of those legs. You crock pot them all day, real slow cook with some chicken broth and the seasonings you like. We usually throw a poblano pepper in there with our little ones. And some taco seasoning, and you let that slow cook all day, and you can just pull those tendons right out of the turkey leg. And it makes a delicious turkey taco, and we shred them up. We'll cook 3 or 4 legs up at a time, and that'll feed our family of 4. We have 2 small kids, so
Yeah, I love it. It's so incredibly rewarding, isn't it? And I agree with you, Justin. It's so easy to dry them out. You can't really do what your grandma used to do, right? Just throw it in the oven.
Nope. And Traegers don't work as good as on turkeys as they do on other stuff. You gotta really watch it, like a turkey breast on a Traeger.
Yeah.
And if anybody knows how to do that, all ears.
wrapped in bacon.
No, bacon's cheating.
So let's talk a little bit about, just in conclusion, just being a part of the solution. So talk to me a little bit about the National Wild Turkey Federation. I know you guys are both members, correct?
Absolutely.
Yep, for years.
All 3 of us.
So you can look it up online. It's an awesome organization. I've been part of that. I've gone to the National Wild Turkey Federation National Conference back in Atlanta, and it's a really wonderful organization, and they go out of their way to not only conserve, hunt, and share, which is their motto, but they do a really good job of bringing it down to the level of a brand new hunter. So you don't have to be an expert hunter to join this organization. In fact, they cater a lot to new hunters. So let's go, and then also being part of the solution. On the back of every hunting license, actually on the back of every fishing license, you're going to have the CalTIP number. And so be part of the solution. And if you're seeing people that are stealing a public resource, don't be quiet about it. People aren't going to get caught if you turn a blind eye to it and walk away. One thing, just briefly touch on this first one on the Q&A. I think it's a really good question about how does turkey behavior change during heavy hunting pressure? What do you think?
That's a very good question.
Yeah,
it's a very good question, and it changes drastically, believe it or not. When you're dealing with birds that you've been that have been pressured for the whole season, you're going to deal with very tough conditions. Is it undoable? No, it's not. You can still manage to pull out a bird from one of those situations, but like the patience is a virtue. You got to be willing to stick it out and willing to stick it out until closing time. And if it doesn't work that day, you get back out there and you try again. Pressured birds are everywhere, especially on public land. Private land, they're not quite so much as much, but they still get pressured. Especially if you're on a piece of private property that has like 2 or 3 hunters that are able to go out there. The biggest thing you gotta consider is, we as hunters need to kind of think about sustainability in our turkey populations as well. If we know that there's only one gobbler in an area, you might want to consider someplace else, right? You don't want to go out there and kill the only gobbler in one area and not have that availability to go there again next year, because the population hasn't increased. So sustainability in your areas is another thing that you got to think about when you're dealing with pressured birds. So if you're dealing with one area that you've been known to have birds, but 20 people go out there and hunt it, it might become a problem. So just think about that.
I will add, if you're on public land, and you're covered up in turkeys and the populations are good and they can sustain, taking 1 or 2 toms out of there, maybe don't even set up decoys or call. Use the other hunters and the way they're stirring the birds up to your advantage. I've done that 100 times at my normal spot that I go to. I'll hear another hunter. I'll leave my decoys at the trailhead or hidden behind a tree, and I'll just go sit and in those areas of the topography where it's path of least resistance for those birds. And I've been successful doing that, letting those other hunters do the work for me. And I'm just sitting there on my butt underneath the tree, being patient.
Love it. So we're just about out of time. I do see a comment in the chat. It's a good one, and it comes from a hunter ed instructor who's done this before. And the comment is, take a kid turkey hunting.
Absolutely.
And his comment is, you'll enjoy it more just watching that kid hunt. And I completely agree. It's one of those hunts, you don't have to be in top physical condition. And it's one of the few hunts that I regularly do that you can get a kid hooked on turkey hunting like within hours, sometimes even off the roost. When you're hearing them gobble, there's just nothing better. And when you're hearing them gobble and you look at that kid and you see his big eyes or her big eyes just like, what was that? It doesn't get any better than that. So that would be my challenge to everybody out here is take a kid turkey hunting. We've got a junior opener that's coming up, and usually that's super, super productive. That's on the 23rd this year. That's a whole week before everybody gets out. You get the weekend to hunt, the 23rd and 24th. So that would be my suggestion. You guys have any closing thoughts on that before we close out?
I got something. If your kid's too little to go hunt or too fidgety or anything, I've made it a point in both of my sons' lives, their whole lives, that whatever I go out and harvest, I bring home and I let them touch it and play with it and get used to it and what it looks like. And then they watch the process from, cutting the animal up and shrink wrapping the meat all the way to, mom cooks it. So if you can't get them out hunting, let them see the downstream side of that. Like, we're not just out there killing everything. We're doing this so we can eat dinner. And I think that's equally as important. But that being said, I have a video in my phone of my oldest saying it's the best day of his life, and we didn't even see a bird. So
awesome.
Yeah.
So fun. You guys are great. Thank you, Hannah, so much for joining us.
Yeah.
I would love to have you guys on again sometime. And good luck this spring, Hannah. And send me some more pictures. Keith, thank you so much for being on. And if you haven't researched the National Wild Turkey Federation, jump on there, become a member. And with that being said, I'm going to say goodnight to everybody. Thanks so much for your time.